Yes, welcome once again to the Daily Huddle. I am your host, Dr. Monica Oganda. Let me fix my camera so you can see me. We are talking about the stages of spiritual awakening, and I'm going to take you through the journey from the heroine or the hero's journey, as popularized by Joseph Campbell and the like, because the stages of spiritual awakening can be described as yes, a journey towards self-awareness, but mostly as a way to integrate your consciousness with collective, with divine consciousness and a connection larger than yourself. And even though the experience can be deeply personal and can vary widely, there are some common stages that many people go through as they awaken spiritually. So, as I am describing these stages, if you recognize yourself on that stage, on that phase of growth, I want you to say, "That's me," right? So and I say stage number one, and you say, "That's me, stage number one." Or I describe stage number two, "That's me, stage number two." Okay, I want you to describe yourself, announce yourself so that we all know where we are standing. And then I'm going to give you some clues and some suggestions as to how to move from one stage to the other. Now, I'm going to assert that nobody here is in stage number one. And stage number one is the unawakened state. It is ignorance. It is being asleep. It's when people are living primarily through ego-driven desires and attachments. They identify with material success, with external validation, with the roles in society, job titles, family roles, accumulation. Life can feel automatic and stressful or lacking depth. And spiritual matters are not a priority. Spiritual matters are seen like another department. Like, I'll get to that eventually, right? And some may feel like something is missing, but they can't really quite put the finger on what it is. And so they keep accumulating because they think that's going to fill that hole, right? Maybe you're not one of those people, but maybe you know one of those people, or maybe you've been one of those people, right? And usually what happens at this unawakened, asleep state is that you get thrust into the second stage, which is the trigger. It is the awakening call. It's the moment that something shifts. It could be a crisis, it could be a trauma, it could be a significant life event like a death or a divorce or a disappointment of these. And it disrupts the normal flow of life and sparks a deep questioning, like, what is the purpose of my life? Who am I really? There has got to be a better way. And people at this stage often feel an intense desire for more meaning, leading to that first glimpse of awakening. That's the beginning of questioning old beliefs, old values. Things don't make sense anymore. It's like, this ain't it. This ain't it, right? And so that then leads, you can see how they kind of stack on top of each other, to stage number three, which is the search, which is seeking. Because once that call has been heard, the person enters that seeking stage. There's an intense desire to learn, to grow, to explore different paths, to question. You might dive into self-help books and spiritual texts and meditation practices, or you might meet a spiritual teacher. And people often experiment with various belief systems or practices to find what resonates in their heart, what resonates in their consciousness. And it's a stage of curiosity and hunger for knowledge, but also filled with confusion because there are things that you learn that are contradictory to other frameworks or other belief systems, and which one's right and which one's this one. I remember very vividly going through this in college when I felt like I couldn't have free, in Spanish, is libre albedrío, like free will to just explore, to just question. My parents were embarrassed that I was asking so many questions in catechism school because we grew up Catholic. And I remember one time my mom's like, could you just please not ask any questions? Could you just get through an hour of catechism class and just basically STFU? Just don't say nothing. You're going to get kicked out. I just want you to be able to go without any incident. And the gift of that stage was compliance. It wasn't questions, right? And so when I got to college, I'm like, yes, I can finally ask questions. This is the place where you ask questions, the place of higher learning. And so I remember distinctly a time when I was at my dorm and I had all these sacred textbooks. I had the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, different versions of the Bible, and the Old Testament, and the Apocrypha, and all these other things. And I was like, I don't care what truth is, God. I don't care what the truth is. I want to know what it is. Right. And so just tell me, just reveal yourself. Like, what's up? I want to know you. And, it was a real heart to heart, honest, authentic, genuine demand that I placed on the demand. I was like, show yourself to me. And so that search, that seeking leads to the dark night of the soul. Stage 4 is the dark night of the soul. It is where the battle is fought and won. This stage is often painful. And as the ego begins to crumble and old attachments fall away, there's a sense of loss, there's a sense of disillusionment or deep sadness, grief. People can feel disconnected from their previous lives and struggle with letting go of the old ways of being. And it's a purging process where, you're shedding your ego and your conditioning and your illusions. So it can feel isolating and lonely, but it's a crucial stage for breaking down what no longer serves. Can you imagine going from one shore to the other end of the shore, like in a lake or something, right? Or a beach, if it's short enough. And you're in the middle of the lake. And in the middle of the lake, you're like tired and you're like, oh, when is this ever going to end? But if you turn, it's just you're equidistant from the next shore as you are from the one that you just left. If you go back to the one where you just left, you're at the same, you're still going to have to make that journey, right? And so you have a decision to make. And that decision is to keep going because it's going to take you just as long to get to the other side as it did to go to where you first started. So you decide to keep going. And that takes you to the next stage, which is integration, the rebuilding or the enlightenment. And this is, you may have heard of a word called atonement, atonement. I pronounce it at one ment because atonement implies that there's some kind of forgiving or restitution that needs to happen for some wrong, for some inherent brokenness or something like that. At one ment, though, implies that integration, right? That rebuilding or that enlightenment. Because after that dark night, you start integrating the lessons from that dark night and your consciousness begins to expand. You develop a deeper self-awareness and a sense of connection to the universe and divine energy and source and God and whatever you call that thing, that divine being. And there's a feeling of alignment between your inner world and your outer actions. If there is no alignment or if there's very little alignment with your inner world and your outer actions, then you tend to work towards that alignment. It's like, okay, I got to get rid of this. I got to say no to that. I got to confront this thing. I've got to surrender that thing. And so the ego doesn't disappear necessarily, but it takes a backseat as your higher self begins to guide your actions and your decisions. Stage 5. Then stage 6 is like this letting go, this surrender, this flowing. You begin to live from a place of trust. You realize that you don't need to control everything, that you're guided by a higher intelligence, and life feels more effortless as you surrender to that flow. You're trusting that things unfold as they should unfold, and you begin to want what's wanted. Many times what we try to do is impute our will on reality. And it's like, if I really am a master, then I will be able to manipulate and machinate and magic up the results that I desire. Whereas in the surrender stage, it's like, I want what's wanted. And I'm not going to fight the natural flow of things. I'm going to surrender to the natural flow of things. Different than resignation. Surrender and resignation are not the same. Because with surrender, that need for approval or material success or external validation fades and peace becomes your default state. Whereas the resignation, you still want those things, but you're like, but I can't have them, right? So with surrender, there's this deep sense of acceptance of yourself and of others and of the world. And then finally, there is this sense of oneness, of unity consciousness. At the deepest, level of spiritual awakening. There's an overwhelming sense of unity with everything. It's no longer like, oh, it's my world and I have this separate identity and everybody else has a separate identity. You even start looking at other people's actions as a reflection of your own consciousness. So you pause before responding to other people, but you also pause before receiving things from other people. Like, this may not be mine, right? And the way you check yourself, one of our precepts is to check yourself before you wreck yourself. The way you check yourself is, where are you emotionally? When something triggers you and makes you mad and elicits an emotional reaction out of you, that typically is your work to do. Even if it is collective, you may not be pissed at one person, you may be pissed at the system, but that's your work to do. The boundaries between yourself and others dissolve, and you can see that the world around you, the people around you, are a prism of your own consciousness. Not PRISON, prison, but PRISM, right? Like a mirror of your own consciousness, and you experience that interconnectedness of life. You recognize that you are part of the divine, and so is everyone and everything around you. There's no separation, only oneness. And so out of that oneness, you serve. Out of that oneness, you feel called to contribute to the world in meaningful ways, using your gifts to help awaken others or to improve their lives. This stage is marked by living in your purpose, from your purpose, and creating positive impact, knowing that your growth is connected to the collective consciousness of that oneness that you've already started to experience. And when somebody is in front of you acting a dang on fool, your first reaction isn't judgment or disdain. Your first reaction is curiosity, like, oh, where do I do that? Because if it's in front of me, it came from me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have noticed. Kind of like Wi-Fi signals in your house. You know you have Wi-Fi in your house. You can't see it, but you can see the effects of it because you can connect to the internet, you can get on Zoom, et cetera, et cetera. So in the same way, you may not know, you may not see the ways in which you act a fool, but if it's in front of you and you see the results of it, you know it's in there, like ragu. Oh, so you start getting creative, you start getting curious, you start asking questions, you start pausing, journaling, meditating, reveal yourself to me, God, just like I did with God in that dorm room so many years ago. And so those stages that I just mentioned are not necessarily linear, and you may even move back and forth between them. Sometimes you'll revisit old stages for deeper healing or learning. Sometimes you'll experience another crisis and you'll kind of like backslide into one of those other stages. There may be places or domains in your life. For example, you may be very evolved when it comes to relationships, but very primal when it comes to money. If you experience any kind of money stress, you revert back to ego driven. You're like, oh no, well, we're not gonna do is be broke and homeless. You kidding me, right? Or you discover that you are conditional, that you actually do barter in your relationships. You do have a tit for tat in relationships. I do this for you, you do that for me. If I do this for you and you don't do that for me, then that means I'm not loved. That means you're taking advantage of me. That means da da da. And there's a part of you that hasn't yet started to observe yourself, let alone question the conclusions to which you jump, the assumptions from which you operate. And so that begins the cycle all over again in each domain of your life, whether it's your health and wellness, whether it's your relationships, whether it's your money, your profession, the way you show up in the world, how you treat your friends, et cetera, et cetera. And so you keep going in this evolution until all domains of your life are covered. Imagine that your whole life is like a pizza pie. And so you have different slices, and in each one of those slices, you take on a different level of mastery until everything is covered. And that's the joy of life, that you get to experience yourself, to love others through you, and to have compassion for the general human condition, because you see it in yourself and you see it in others and the people that you serve. And so from that oneness, you might feel like, that sounds boring. All this bliss, all those nam myoho renge kyo, like where's the fun in that? I need a little bit of drama. I need a little bit of challenge. And I'm going to say to you, welcome to your life, right? And some of the conversations that I have had with teams and clients that I have led, Sometimes they confuse peace with boredom. I'm gonna say that again. Sometimes we confuse peace with boredom. You think peace is boring, as opposed to the gift of the work that you've already done. Right? The state, the default state of oneness, of at one-ment, of surrender, of unity consciousness. If you look back to your 0 to 7, from the time that you were first conceived and you were in your mother's womb, to how your labor and delivery was, to how people took care of you in the first month of your existence out on planet Earth, to your childhood and infancy, from the time that you were weeks old, a year old, to 7 years old. If there was any kind of chaos, if there was any kind of conditionality in that time, you have that in your cellular memory subconsciously, as though that's the way the world works. If, for example, when your mother got pregnant with you, she was scared, she felt inconvenienced, she felt like there was going to be judgment because of your existence, then on some subconscious level, you're always going to be seeking to justify your existence, whether by performing acts of love, by giving what you don't have so that people can see, look at how much she sacrificed, look how much he sacrificed. By being quiet and not bothersome and compliant so that, you don't cause too much bother and you're not too much of a burden. It's already a burden that you exist, don't cause any more. And these are not things that you do on purpose. These are things that you do on a subconscious level. And when you do them on a subconscious level and you get conscious results, then you begin to wonder, like, why does this keep happening to me? And why do I keep doing this thing? You don't quite have your finger on the pulse of the cause, but you are aware of the effect. And so this is why Carl Jung has been quoted as saying, if you don't make the unconscious conscious, it'll drive your decisions and you will call it fate. This is what he meant. You're going to have to uproot, you're going to have to dig up those things that you do unconsciously. You're going to have to be conscious of them, because at the consciousness level, you have choices. You can interrupt, you can decide to keep going, or you stop and pivot and go a different direction. But if it's driving you and you don't even know it, then you're going to be surprised when you crash into a tree. You're going to be surprised when you drive yourself off of a ravine. You're like, what? How did I do that? I know how to drive this. Why am I doing this? And it's not a rhetorical question. The invitation is, yeah, why do you do that? Yeah, where did that come from? Where did you learn that? Who was the first person that made you feel that way? Or told you that? Made you believe that? What was the price of not believing that? Such that you still carry it to this day. Yeah. When you begin to ask yourself those questions and get them, this is how you accelerate the development of your own consciousness. So I would love to hear from you all, because I don't see anything in the chat. Nobody said, I'm stage this, I'm stage that. So I would love to hear from you all. Where are you in this? Where do you see yourself? And what resonated in what I've just described for yourself? Michelle said, I have no clue where I'm at. Well, just lost, Lord. I don't know where I'm at. Somebody come find me. Do the Find My Michelle on your device and go get her. So that sounds like seeking. That sounds like there's been some level of trigger, and now you're like, okay, what's up? What's up? Right? That's that searching, that's that seeking stage. I love it. Shiva, ray of light, my love, come on up.
Hello.
Hi.
This has been so wonderful. So I can't remember the stages, but I am in this stage where, so I've had the dark, dark night of the soul that I live to tell about it. And so whatever that stage is coming out of that kind of,
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like I've been in a stupor And I'm like, wait, what? And I feel
Mm,
like the whole entire world is a lie. All of my beliefs is a lie. And I feel like I'm starting from scratch. And
mm,
I'm no longer angry about it.
mm-hmm.
So I don't remember whatever that stage is.
Yeah, integration. That, and then thank you for bringing up the anger of it. Because a lot of times when you have that dark night of the soul, when you have that crumbling of old paradigms and old beliefs, and you've seen behind the curtain and you're like, oh my God, this isn't what I thought it was. I've been lied to, or I've been deceived, or I've been misled, or I've been to use one of the words that you used, in a stupor of sorts. Um, Sometimes we don't admit that the first response to that is usually anger, even though anger is a proxy emotion, it's a secondary emotion, but it is usually a first response because it is the part of you that feels anger is the part of you that is interested in justice. It's the part of you that is interested in balance and equanimity. And so when there's no balance or no equanimity to be assessed, that response is anger because like, wait a minute, this is unfair. Wait a minute. You don't just lie to me in my face for all these years and I'm over here thinking one thing and it's another. How dare you?
Oh
Right?
my God. Yes.
Right. Listen, ask me how I know. Okay. And so that understanding, then it's like, okay, wait. So you didn't lie to me, you didn't deceive me out of malice. This is just the way it is. This is just how you are.
Oh my God.
And so now we begin to question the system, we begin to question reality, we begin to question ourselves and our own sanity. And then it's like, oh, hold on. So this isn't a bug, this is a feature.
Can you?
Am I telling on you, Emmanuel Kool-Aid?
Yes. I was literally about to say, can you go into talking about that? Because while I'm not angry, there is at times, well, there is times I'm no longer in why me, but I think I am still there. What you said, like, what? Like my
Right.
brain wants you, oh, I feel so seen. It wants like justice, like, no, make it make sense.
Right. And God, you could have been, there could have been 1,000 different ways you could have done this. Why does it have to be so painful? Why so much suffering? Why so much disappointment? Why do we have to cross the street to get across?
Mhm.
Run around the block to cross the street. There's got to be an easier way to do it than this, surely. Can we avoid
Surely.
pain? And so the question about avoiding pain is still ego driven because
Mm,
the pain only comes from our attachments, right? If you notice, children can go through some of the most deleterious situations in the world, homelessness, uh, you know, um, parents dying, people abusing them, et cetera, and they will find a way to make it okay.
yeah.
We're homeless, we're getting evicted. Ooh, that means we get to live in the car, we get to go on an adventure. Mom and dad are leaving. Ooh, that means I get to live in two houses until the attachment gets threatened. That's when we start losing our fucking mind. When the
Mm,
attachment gets threatened. It's like, wait, I'm losing mom, I'm losing dad. Wait, what does this mean that I'm wrong, that I'm bad? What can I do to make mom and dad stay together? Before it was an adventure. Now that your attachment is threatened, now it's a problem. So instead of trying to fix the circumstances so that our attachments remain intact, let's examine our attachment. What do you make it mean? That you have money, that you don't have money, that it's unfair, that it's not advantageous, that it's advantageous for some and not others. What do you make it mean that you only found out about it now? Do you think you're slow? Do you think you're stupid? Do you think that you are naive? Do you think, so all of those attachments reveal something about either our assumptions or an identity. And when you realize that contrast is a teaching device, then you would understand why you would have to be exposed to the gross in order to understand the sublime. Then you understand why you would have to be exposed to injustice in order to be advocating for justice cleanly and not from an agenda, not from it's justice because I say it is, because that's what other people do, right? Other people like it's. I'm gonna tell you what justice is. I'm gonna tell you what's right and wrong, and then you follow and you comply, right? That's
yeah.
what authoritarian regimes do. And so for you and for anybody that's going through that stage of disillusionment and then the dark night of the soul, we're not, and like I said, those stages are not linear. It's not like we're ever done. It's almost like, you go through one path and then you go through another and then you go through another. And it's like this never-ending evolution, because the minute that you think you're clean about something, you begin to disintegrate about something else.
Yep.
And then you're thinking, well, damn, I mean, really? Like, is this gonna be a never-ending cycle of suffering and disillusionment before yes.
Yeah. It's like
Yes.
you get to the top of the mountain, quote unquote, and then like it collapses to the valley, and you're like, oh, and here we go again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and every time that it happens, is that there might be some times when every time that it happens, you get madder and more bitter because you're like, Jesus, when is this fucking over? Excuse my
Oh
French.
my God.
But then there comes a point you're like, oh, I get it. Okay, let's rebuild. Okay, let's accept. Okay, let's question. Okay, let's see what's available. And the moment that you start dropping those attachments and you just become present with what is and you accept what is, the less you have to go through it.
Mm.
And because then what happens is that you can then become a Sherpa for somebody else going through it, and their anger and their sadness and their questioning and their faith crisis and whatever the case may be. And then you can see the gift in it. Today, for example, is October 3rd, and it is the 3rd anniversary of my father's transition. And I didn't think I would get to this point because my father's death was so painful. I was like, I'm not somebody's little girl anymore. As though that's a horrible tragedy. As though that means I'm orphaned and abandoned was the implication of saying I'm nobody's little girl anymore. Like my dad is gone. I'm not a daddy's little girl anymore because daddy's gone. And that caused sadness, that caused suffering, that caused. But today, 3 years to the day of his transition, when I say I am nobody's little girl anymore, that's that's a declaration of my sovereignty. That's a
Wow.
declaration of my own journey, that I can be and become and own my own person without being attached to being this one's daughter, being this one's wife, being this one's friend, being this one's boss, being this one's founder, or whatever, independent of my labels and titles. I am here, and here I am. And so when you get to the place, that evolution where you can be all of who you are without attaching yourself to a relationship, to a bank account, to a profession, to a title, etc. In fact, when people can think the worst of you and you can still stand in your sovereignty. Because sometimes it's like, I don't need a title, but I do need your good opinion.
Yeah.
I do need you to think well of me. When you don't even need that, it's liberating and freeing. And for some people that may be stuck in some of those earlier stages, it can be terrifying and intimidating, and sometimes we go through that ourselves. So I'm going to encourage you, Shiva, that you are, and Michelle, you too, you are not lost. And this is not a problem.
Mm.
This is a natural progression of your ever expanding consciousness as you become one with all that is. And that can seem so big and vast and, like, what does that even mean? How does that even show up in practical matters, right? And so I'm going to say, stay in that place of discovery, stay in that place of curiosity, stay in that place of creation. Because where curiosity is the invitation, it's the creak in the door to creation. Like, I wonder if I could do this. I wonder if this is possible. Why does this happen? How come I do it like that? Where did this come from? And then you can begin to make things conscious and then create from there.
Mm. That's powerful.
Make sense?
Ooh, yes, yes. Oh my God, thank you.
You're welcome. And listen, feel free to curse that MF. What did Kamala said? This human being. So feel free to curse,
Let's see,
that's
girl.
because he's the God, the God of creation is not diminished by your anger. It's like, now come, what you got? Tell me. I'm not diminished by your questions,
Oh my God, I love it. Thank you.
right? The systems might be threatened by your questions, but not the infinite. Shit. Go ahead, ask a question. So I'm just noticing the time. Rashida, I saw that you had your hand up, darling, but we have run out of time. So I want to say love generously, give of yourself, your time, your energy, your attention, eat more plant-based foods, exercise. Remember that twerking is a Kundalini raising exercise, darling. Go ahead and twerk shamelessly. Make sure that you sleep at least 7 to 8 hours. If you're a woman and you're feminine dominant, you want to sleep 9 hours. We need more sleep because we carry more on the spiritual realm. And then, of course, stress less and always audit your assumptions. Check yourself before you wreck yourself, and certainly before you wreck other people. Be considerate about your wreckage. We love you. See you next time.